What's going on, everybody? It's RoyJ here, and welcome back to another episode of Sleeper Sunday. So Sleeper Sunday, for those of you that don't know, is a series I came up with showcasing fun hidden decks you may not know about that can deal quite a bit of damage in the proper hands. We'll be going over a basic deck list, strengths, weaknesses, and what could be done to make the deck better, and of course a few replays to see the deck in action. In today's episode, we're going to take a look at the winner of this month's poll, Unchained. Technically, the winner was Ice Jade, however, Ice Jade was so on a level of just unplayable that I couldn't bring myself to do it. So Unchained is a mid-range archetype of unshackled demons that focuses on destroying its own cards to facilitate card advantage and control the board state. They have their own lore and etymology if you want to read that on the wiki, however it wasn't really something that I could fit all into one script because Lord knows this video is going to be long enough as is, so if you feel like actually seeing what it is, then you can go ahead and check it out there. They were released in Chaos Impact in October of 2019, with their most recent support being out of Eternity Code. It's a link-focused extra deck requiring the high-level Unchained monsters that go under the sub-archetype Unchained Souls that can also use the opponent's monsters as material in certain situations. So they are broken down into a smaller subsection of Unchained Twins, with Unchained Souls being the higher-level ones that usually have the stronger effects and higher stats. The Unchained Twins are 3 different attributes of Fire, Water, and Dark, and all of them happen to be level 3 fiends with the same stats of 1500 attack and defense, whereas Abominable Unchained Soul and Unchained Soul of Disaster, their 2 Unchained Soul monsters, are both level 8 Dark Fiends, but with one having 3000 attack and 1500 defense, and one having 0 attack and 3000 defense respectively. So they do revolve around popping their own cards to facilitate advantage, which you can start off by seeing in Unchained Twins Aruha right away, because it says you can target a card you control, destroy it, and if you do, special this card from your hand, but it actually locks you into fiend monsters in terms of special summoning for the turn, so it does prevent a little bit of extra play with the deck in terms of what you can actually do, but it has no restriction on the actual Unchained monsters themselves as they are all fiends. Rakia has a little bit of a different effect that is still a pop for your own cards, however it is a quick effect while it's already on the field that lets you target a card you control and destroy it with the same lock. Unchained Twins Sarama, which wasn't part of the original batch of Aruha and Rakia, and was instead introduced in a later piece of support, actually allows you to target an Unchained card in your grave, except another copy of itself, set it to your field, and then destroy a card you control without actually locking you into anything. And all of the Unchained Twins share the effect that if they're destroyed on the field by a card effect except for themselves or by battle, you can special summon any Unchained monster from your hand or deck except another copy of themselves, and all of their effects are hard once per turns. Typically, you want to open Aruha or Rakia and one of your back row in order to not only get your entire link fodder out, but also in order to reset whatever you popped with Sarama, because Sarama is able to actually give you back the resources that you popped in order to use the effects. The Unchained Souls are necessary for the Unchained Soul Link monsters aside from Unchained Abomination, and rather than having specific floating effects such as these, they actually have their own as well as other effects on field. So Abominable Unchained Soul says you can only special summon it once per turn. If a card you control is destroyed by battle or card effect, you can actually special summon it from your hand, which is great for getting it out of your hand in case it was bricking it. And if it's special summoned, you can discard a card to non-targeting destroy any card in the field, and then once per turn during the end phase, if this card is in the graveyard because it was destroyed on the field and sent there this turn, you can special summon this card but place it on the bottom of the deck when it leaves the field. So while it doesn't actually float into anything else when it's destroyed, it does float back into itself, which can trigger the special summon clause, which allows it to pop something on the field. And instead of like banishing it or just putting it back in the graveyard, you do get to put it back on the bottom of the deck for your Unchained Twins to special summon it back later. Unchained Soul of Disaster, which was the original Unchained Soul, is actually quite unique in that it gains 300 attack for each Unchained card in your graveyard, that includes your back row, and says you can only use each of the following effects of it once per turn. You can target a face-up monster your opponent controls, unfortunately not a quick effect, but immediately after this effect resolves, link summon a Dark Link monster, using only this card you control and that opponent's monster as material. Also, if it's destroyed by battle or card effect while it's on the field, you can target an Unchained monster in your graveyard rather than in your hand or deck, and then special summon it, except for another Unchained Soul of Disaster. So this is one of your bread and butter cards in terms of actually getting a field advantage, but overall, because it is a spell speed 1, it isn't all too great for your turn 1 plays, and I actually prefer to go for Abominable Unchained Soul, just so Unchained Soul of Disaster doesn't end up, getting murked, and also because of the trap cards, which we will mention later, actually allowing you to facilitate more board control with Abominable Unchained Soul than you can with Soul of Disaster on the opponent's turn. Those are actually their only monsters in the main deck. It's not even that they're the only ones we play, they just don't have anymore. But for hand traps, we actually have 3 copies of Ash Blossom and 2 copies of Ghost Ogre for your Ghost Girls, because of course they are nice cards. Also, Ghost Ogre can actually kill your own monsters to trigger their floating effect, which isn't something I've had to happen yet, but is something that could potentially come up. But this deck is also unique in that it can play Dimension Shifter, because keep in mind, all of them float if they're destroyed by battle or card effect. However, it doesn't say that they have to be sent to the graveyard. The only one that requires being in the graveyard is Abominable Unchained Soul. Therefore, it doesn't matter if they're banished, if they're destroyed, so long as they're destroyed, they get to actually float, which is a bit of a problem for Unchained Twins Sarama's resetting effect, but Dimension Shifter is just such a strong card that if you can play it, honestly, I recommend playing it, because it can just completely blow out certain matchups. So Unchained actually does have quite a bit of back row support, and by that I mean they only have 2 spells and 2 traps, unfortunately, and we only play one of them, and that is Abomination's Prison. It says you can add an Unchained card from your deck to your hand, and if this set card is destroyed by card effect, you can special summon an Unchained monster from your deck, and you can only use each effect of Abomination's Prison once per turn. So unfortunately, this isn't an Unchained card itself, meaning that you can't continuously get advantage off of Sarama. However, it does allow you to add any Unchained card from your deck to your hand, be it any of the monsters or any of the back row other than itself. Also, keep that floating effect in mind of it being set and destroyed by card effect, allowing you to special an Unchained from your deck, as all of the back row that we cover actually has that effect, which is why Rakia and Aruha are 1.5 card combos when you have any of the pieces of back row. For the only other spell in the deck, we actually play 3 copies of Pot of Extravagance. Honestly, playing this over Prosperity isn't like too necessary, and it's kind of just a gamble thing, or if, you know, you want to play it over something else. But I just like getting the additional draw, and also, you know, Prosperity is still very expensive if any of you are trying to copy this list, so... But yeah, again, that is it for the spells. They do have Wailing of the Unchained Souls, which says if you link summon an Unchained Link monster, you can target a card in the field and destroy it, and then it has the same floating effect. And while it is fine getting free removal that you can honestly trigger every turn, it is a bit underwhelming instead of having, you know, any of your back row that isn't this in your hand. So starting off with our trap cards, we do play both traps that the Unchained archetype has, starting off with Abominable Chamber of the Unchained, that allows you to special an Unchained monster from your hand or graveyard with the same floating effect as all the others, which I will stop mentioning from now on. So special summoning an Unchained from hand or grave is actually good on both players' turns, as getting it on your turn will allow you to get access to all of your twins and your Unchained Soul of Disaster for their spell speed 1 effects. However, when you summon it on your opponent's turn, you can actually go for Abominable Unchained Soul for a free disruption by discarding a card and destroying a card on the field. Keep in mind, this actually doesn't have any restrictions on summoning in defense or summoning a non-link, so any of your 3 Unchained Link monsters can actually be summoned on the opponent's turn from the graveyard by using Abominable Chamber. So while it doesn't technically do anything on its own like the next one that we will show actually does, it is really great for facilitating advantage in a control-like deck. The final piece of Unchained backer we play is Escape of the Unchained, which is a simple Dynamorphia Brute-esque effect if you know what that is, which allows you to target an Unchained monster you control and a card on the field and destroy them both. This, of course, is amazing, being able to not only make your Unchained monsters float, but also being able to non-target destroy any card on the field, including both on yours and your opponent's. One of the best opening hands you can typically get is Aruha and Escape, by setting the Escape, activating your Aruha, popping it, special summoning, and then using your Escape to summon Sarama setting the Escape, destroying the Aruha in the process, which will then float into one of your Unchained Souls, then allowing you to link summon, and giving you 2 free disruptions right there. For the non-Unchained back row, we run some pretty standard stuff. Torrential Tribute is great in this sort of deck. Being able to nuke the entire board will trigger all of your floating effects, which is awesome. Solemn Strike is Solemn Strike, and it allows you to get past a bunch of different monster effects. And then Infinite Impermanence is our 4th hand trap in the deck. I almost said 3rd, but I forgot about D-Shifter. And of course, it's just a good disruption overall to have. So I have actually covered all of the Unchained main deck cards. So onto the extra deck, they have 3 different Link monsters of Link ratings 2, 3, and 4 respectively, starting off with Unchained Soul of Rage. So it is a Link 2 Dark Fiend with up and down pointing arrows that requires 2 monsters, including an Unchained Soul monster. It says during your opponent's main phase, quick effect, you can target a face-up special summon monster monster your opponent controls. Immediately after this effect resolves, link summon a Dark Link monster except another copy of itself by using only that monster and this card you control as material. And then if it's destroyed by battle or card effect, you can target a Fiend monster in your graveyard except another copy of itself, and you can only use each effect of Unchained Soul of Rage once per turn. So both Unchained Soul of Rage and their Link 3 Unchained Soul of Anguish, which we will get to, actually have the same floating effect, and so I won't cover it anymore. However, both of them actually have a similar effect involving using your opponent's Link monsters as material. However, Unchained Soul of Rage is the only one that can be done on the opponent's turn, therefore it is the typical end board piece you're going to end off on, because ending off on the Link 3 doesn't really get you that much advantage, and it's almost impossible to actually end off on the Unchained Abomination Link 4 just on turn 0, because you just can't get that many bodies on board natively. So Unchained Soul of Rage is your typical end board piece, and is one of the main things you want to go for, and remember that you do have to use Unchained Soul of Disaster or Abominable Unchained Soul for either of the first two, or another copy of a Link monster, so unfortunately you can't just, use your little twins and then get free big bodies on board. What you'll typically be going into off of Unchained Soul of Rage, other than Nightmare Unicorn, is Unchained Soul of Anguish, which has the exact same, stats in terms of attribute and type as Unchained Soul of Rage. However, it is a Link 3 with 2400 attack, with up, down left, and down right pointing arrows. It requires 2 or more monsters, including an Unchained Soul, and has the same effect as Unchained Soul of Rage. However, instead of being a quick effect, it has to be done on your turn. Technically, Unchained Soul of Anguish, while having a little bit more attack, is overall worse than Unchained Soul of Rage, but if you can stop your opponent enough, you can just use this to climb into this to climb into this. What this is Unchained Abomination, which is their big final boss monster. It is a Link 4 Dark Fiend with 3000 attack, with up, down left, down right, and down bottom pointing arrows, and it requires 2 or more monsters, including a Link monster, making it a little bit more generic. If it says, if a card on the field is destroyed by card effect except Unchained Abomination, and except during the damage step, you can target a card in the field and destroy it. When another monster is destroyed by battle, you can target a card in the field and destroy it. And during the end phase, you can target one card in the field and destroy it. And you can only use each effect of Unchained Abomination once per turn. So yeah, it is a very bloated boss monster, potentially getting up to 3 pops per turn. Though overall, it is a bit specific in that you have to have other cards to pair it with, because you can't just, Unchained Abomination, destroy something by battle, effect, pop something else, effect, because something was popped, pop something else. It does have that restriction, so it's not that strong, but you'll at least guaranteed get the end phase pop more often than not, making it a pretty decent end boss monster. However, it is not the optimal thing to go for more often than not, because again, it does require additional setup in order to actually trigger these pops. Therefore, it is more often better to just go for one of your other Link 4s, which we will get to in a minute. So keep in mind that Unchained Soul of Rage and Anguish actually allow you to Link summon into any Dark Link monster. So you can also go into things like Nightmare Phoenix and Nightmare Unicorn, which we play 1 and 2 of respectively. The 2 mainly just for the extra, but you can go into a second one technically. But these are great disruptions to go into on the opponent's turn, should you not want to just sit on the Unchained Soul of Rage, allowing you to not only link something off, but also being able to shuffle something back with Unicorn should you have the hand advantage. So we do actually play 1 copy of each currently legal Topologic monster, being Trisbania, Bomber Dragon, and Zeraboros. I typically don't make these too often, especially the Link 4s, because, that's just a lot of resources to actually commit. But overall, Bomber Dragon is kind of just a better Unchained Abomination more often than not. Keep in mind it is a mandatory to nuke everything, and it does prevent your other monsters from attacking for the rest of the turn, but he is a 3k body himself, meaning that you're typically not going to need to attack with other things too much. And it actually does have the little burn effect, which is pretty nice. People don't actually seem to notice that more often, and so it is a pretty decent secondary boss monster aside from Unchained Abomination. Trisbania is easier to summon and actually pretty decent against back row matchups. However, keep in mind this will also banish all of your back row, which is a problem because it won't trigger their floating effects. And Zeraboros is a bit of overkill, especially because, again, it banishes rather than destroying first, therefore you won't get any floating. However, you do get some free, punchy punchies. And then finally, we do have Access Code Talker. All of our links, except for Phoenix, are dark, so it won't be getting that many pops per turn. However, pops are pops, and it can get very large, and that's really all you need. So that is really all I have to say about the deck profile. I will admit, I do recall net decking this off of some other content creator. However, I do not remember the name at the moment. I just found it by looking up Unchained deck list, and this was ages ago, so I have made a little bit of my own adjustments. So I will not take credit for this list. However, I find it to be perfectly fine in actually what it can do, and what it can showcase the deck actually being able to do. Speaking of showcasing what the deck can do, I'm going to go ahead and stop talking for now, and I'm going to show off some replays so you guys can see this deck in action, and of course, as always, I will see you afterwards. So there you have it. There are my replays for the Unchained deck for this Sleeper Sunday. I know I couldn't get that many and they weren't too interesting. However, it was really all I could get without people scooping like instantaneously or just people not wanting to play against me, period. So with those out of the way, let's go ahead and start talking about the deck's strengths. So first off, the effects are actually incredibly easy to resolve. All you have to do really is set a back row piece and then have any of the original twins in hand. And because of this, swarming the board is actually pretty easy. You can't necessarily get a Link 4 out very easily because you are locked into special summoning fiends. You can't like do any sort of like crazy Hulk plays or anything like that, but it is serviceable enough to actually get their Link 2 boss monster out, which sometimes may be all that you need as long as you have some of the other back row pieces. Also, depending on the strategy you're going against, using your opponent's monsters as link material could completely disrupt their entire game plan. However, it is a little bit specific, but when given the right opportunity and using the right card, you can overall throw an entire strategy off the kilt. The destruction effects means that they have clear floating capabilities and potentially rebuilding a board after getting it broken, forcing the opponent to properly and carefully choose their outs. For example, they may avoid swinging into one of your guys or actually destroying it by card effect, committing more resources into actually getting something that can do something completely different. And due to no restrictions on having to be sent to the graveyard, you can cheese out really easy things like Dimension Shifter or even Macrocosmos or Dimensional Fissure, and get free wins off of just that sometimes. So while the deck does have a few pretty nice strengths, where there are strengths there are always weaknesses. So starting off, they are a bit clunky in terms of consistency. Drawing the wrong twin or any of the boss monsters can make an entire hand monumentally worse, and there's no one-card combos in the deck. Of course, not every deck needs to be one-card combos, but this deck is a little bit specific in terms of what it needs to have, you know, either Aruha or Rakia or Abomination's Prison, you know, one of these two. And while that isn't the hardest to pull off, even drawing just one of the boss monsters who you'd rather keep in deck to special summon from can just completely throw off a hand. Also, it doesn't natively set up too many disruptions on its own. While I did say a few decks can actually get their entire strategy thrown off by having something linked off, it's very rare for that to actually happen. And a lot of the decks that you're going to be going against can probably recover very easily from having a single card popped, maybe one shuffled and one sent from field to grave. So having the boss monsters, or even just a bunch of different normal summons actually in the deck, can prevent you from getting your good traps to your hand. Without your good traps, again, they don't natively have too much removal on their own, meaning that you're going to be set with a little bit of disruption, but not enough for a lot of decks to actually stop playing. Finally, it's actually pretty difficult to link climb into their own boss monster, especially on turn 1, but even after turn 1, because the only one that allows you to link on your opponent's turn is Unchained Soul of Rage, meaning that you're gonna have to wait bare minimum one turn if your stuff survives to actually go into Unchained Abomination. And even then, Unchained Abomination isn't really worth the wait when you could have just continued to use the little guys using less resources and having enough to keep using your trap cards instead. So with all of that in mind, how do we make Unchained better? So I'd actually like to see them have better spells with more immediate or easy to trigger on field effects. So Wailing of the Unchained Souls isn't the worst thing, but you'd overall rather search one of your trap cards in terms of getting disruption, because Escape of the Unchained not only gets you a pop that is non-targeting compared to Wailing, but also allows you to flow into your other stuff like Unchained Soul, which can give you an additional pop. And Abomination's Prison is great for being able to search, but, you know, searching is, you know, you can't just build a warrior deck with only Rhoda, you know? So maybe some more resource recovery, like, I don't know, shuffling stuff in your graveyard back into your deck and then drawing one like a Daigusto Emerald, as well as some other effect, would be pretty decent to have on another continuous spell, or at least to make it a little bit more worthwhile in terms of searching spells. By the way, take a shot every time I say in terms of or facilitate. There's a fun drinking game to give you liver cancer right there. I would also like to see more disruptions that have a higher impact scale compared to Escape. You know, something akin to an archetypal Torrential Tribute would be really cool. That could also give you more advantage after resolving it, or a secondary boss monster like Abomination, but with easier to trigger effects. So Abomination is a potentially 3-card pop on its own, but it's not on its own now, is it? You really have to have something else to both trigger the battle destruction, to trigger the card effect destruction. You know, it's a bit too specific. So maybe something that does less overall, but actually has easier to trigger stuff, or stuff that you can just immediately use. Like, I don't know, maybe, you know, once per turn you can just pop a card. I don't know, something like that would be pretty nice. I'd also like to see another main deck twin, potentially a matching one for Sarama, even though I think Sarama is meant to be like some sort of little like spin-off looking one, that instead of setting something from graveyard like Sarama does, maybe could cheese out an Unchained Soul from graveyard and special summon it in face up for a little bit more recovery. It would also help for the link climbing to actually get into Abomination by allowing you to revive Unchained Soul of Rage or Anguish. I think some more floating that isn't just specialing things from hand or deck would be really nice too, or recovering stuff from graveyard. Maybe some removal when they're removed from the field instead, so that you have a little bit more disruption instead of just, you know, special summoning a bunch of monsters that don't really get you anywhere. And honestly, that is all I really have to say about Unchained in terms of what I think about the deck. I really enjoy the idea. I also really like the lore behind it, and I like all of the artwork, and I'm in love with archetypes that pop their own stuff to facilitate advantage. However, I think it's a bit shy of being actually super competitively viable. It has seen a little bit of success here and there, but usually in smaller scale events such as regionals. I know the list that I'm currently using that I modified a little bit is actually from a locals. They currently just aren't equipped to actually deal with higher scale events right now, but I would like to see that change, and maybe they can get some new support sometime in the future that can fix some of the glaring issues that the deck has. But that is just my opinion. Let me know yours down in the comments below, because that's going to do it for the video. So it did get second place. Unchained is the technical winner of the community tab poll that I did for this Sleeper Sunday. Keep in mind that I do a community tab poll on my channel every different month for each Sleeper Sunday, with a list of available decks that you can choose from to see in the next episode. Keep in mind they are only ever up for a maximum of 24 hours, so make sure if you see it to make your vote immediately. But until then, if you liked it, please sure to leave a like, as I'll split this video and the channel into YouTube recommended. And if you want to see more content like this, like the rest of my Sleeper Sunday series, then perhaps consider subscribing, because we're on our way to 1,500 subscribers, and it helps the channel more than anything else. Plus, it's absolutely free. But once again, thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. This is Aurora, signing off.